Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. I'm your host, John Ryan, and we're going to be talking some soccer game semifinals in the UEFA division of the Premier Soccer League with Paul Carr, who's the host of Expected Value Podcast and is one of the most knowledgeable soccer minds on the planet. He's formerly of ESPN Stats and Info and huge sports data analytics mind that will provide unmatched insights into the pair of second leg UEFA soccer matches starting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Last week, Paul hit both of his picks, although admittedly he said that they didn't look so good there at the half, with under 2.5 in Real Madrid-Chelsea and his second pick on Man City to win, though they were down 1-0 and pretty much getting dominated by PSG. So welcome to the show, Paul. I'm glad that you're here to talk about the second leg. My first thought in learning this semifinal, where it just seems like it's an extended halftime.
Yeah,
they had the first leg and now very, very long halftime. And you got to remember that when you do these bets.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of the cliche way of describing it is, it's you play the first leg and you are at halftime, and then they switch venues for the second leg. And it's always a bit of a mental mind game to think about these second legs, sometimes more than others, depending on how the first leg went from a score perspective. Because, again, it's aggregate score over the two legs. So I will use the quarterfinals as an example. So in Bayern and PSG in the quarterfinals, PSG won the first leg 3-2 at Bayern. So because road goals are the tiebreaker, Bayern has to win the second leg by 2 goals, basically, to advance. And the weird result that could happen, and so I picked Bayern to win this game because I thought they could win, and I didn't think they would necessarily advance. That was a long shot play that I was not big on, but they won this game 1-0 and did not advance. So you have to factor in. So Bayern was up 1-0 in this game. PSG's fine with that. They don't care because Bayern has to score another goal in order to advance. PSG doesn't have to score. It doesn't change things too much in that sense. So you just have to kind of mentally wrap your head around what each team has to do to advance, what teams are okay with. PSG in that case is fine with a loss. So it makes the Bayern win more attractive because these 1-goal Bayern wins are fine with PSG. So there's just always this mental gymnastics in this second leg where you have to just make sure you're aware, all right, what happens? Because sometimes you'll see really weird lines, especially for one team to win or even the draw, because the better team doesn't need the win, so you get a much better price on it. So it's always just be aware, know what has to happen, and it's in some ways it's elementary stuff, but in some ways it's stuff I have to keep telling myself as I start thinking through making these picks every time.
Yeah, so I guess the first matchup on Tuesday, this starts at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Obviously, it's in the evening where it's taking place. PSG has a 2-1 advantage from the first leg.
Man City has the 2-1 advantage, right?
So they're probably likely to advance to the final. And I was studying these two teams, and both of them, some people consider them ones that could never get to that level to win it all.
Right.
And I kind of feel bad for the teams and their fan base when you read the history behind them, but at least one of these teams are going to get in there, and I would have to think PSG's probably the one that's going to get there.
Right. Well, Man City's got the 2-1 lead, so they're the big favorite, which I know is what you're trying to say. City, they won 2-1 on the road, and so now they're going home, and they're the better team. They're a weird team. All season they've not been that good in the French league and their regular domestic league play, separate from Champions League. Now they're still right at the top. They're in the title race, but they've been running away with the league more often than not the last decade or so. But then they get to Champions League. They knocked out Barcelona. They knocked out Bayern Munich, who are 2 of the 3 or 4 best teams in Europe. And they have star power. It's not like PSG's this underdog team. They have guys like Neymar and Kylian Mbappe, who, even your casual sports fan is likely familiar with. So they've got the talent. They just haven't shown it in league play, but then they come to Champions League and they're able to knock out these good teams. So all that to say, City has been dominant all season in every competition. They won a League Cup in England already. They're going to win the Premier League as soon as this weekend, probably. So they have been consistent. So kind of like last week, where it was almost a bet on City's consistency. Like, what's you know more or less what you're getting from City. And while that wasn't the case the first half, it came around in the second half. City figured some things out, made some tactical adjustments, and were able to really dominate that game and pull off the comeback. So I'm leaning the same way here. City is at home. They don't have to win. That's kind of the one caveat. They don't have to win this game because a draw is fine to get through. But I just think it's in City's nature, as we've seen all season. Like, they get a goal and will just strangle the life out of a game with possession. They're just not going to give you the ball. It's what they did in the second half against PSG, really. So I expect to see more of that, and I like City to win this game outright.
The PSG kind of helped them in the second half too. There was a mistake in the goal by the goaltender, and then the free on the
free kick that went right through the wall.
Through the wall, they kind of screwed that up pretty.
It was a weird second half in the sense that City dominated possession. They had, I think, 65% possession in the second half after 53, I believe, in the first. They really didn't generate. You're right. They didn't generate a ton of great scoring chances. Like, they had 7 shots, but the expected goal value, meaning how many goals they're going to score on average given those shots, wasn't that high. I think it was under 0.5. And they got a goal on a cross/shot that bounced in, and they got a goal on a free kick that went through the wall. So it was a very weird second half where in some ways it felt like City deserved that comeback win because they had the ball and were creating many more chances, and PSG took 1 shot the whole half. And in some ways it didn't, though, because despite all that possession, City wasn't creating good chances, and they didn't have these massive scoring opportunities. They did have a couple times like the ball goes right through the box, they didn't get a shot off, so it doesn't go into some of those other metrics. But it was a weird second half. The City dominated and at the same time was still kind of lucky to get out of there with a comeback win.
Yeah, and I also noticed the history here that no English team who has ever won the first leg of a Champions League knockout away from home has ever been eliminated in the second. And I'll tell you, Paul, I sometimes hate saying those things. So I feel like I'm putting a whammy on somebody unnecessarily, not that I have that kind of power. But when you see stuff like that, do you think PSG even has a chance to come back? Can they have like a meeting with the coaches and the coaches say, look, we beat ourselves. We played really, really poor in the second half. We allowed this to happen. Do you think they have a chance to come back?
They've got a chance. I think they're around plus 400 to advance, which I wouldn't play. I don't feel like they have a 1 in 5 chance to get through, but they've got a shot because, like I said, this is not an underdog story. This is one of the most expensive teams in the world. They have Neymar, who is one of the best players in the world. There is always the chance that he goes nuts and hangs a hat trick on Man City. I don't think it's likely. Because, and this is where City is very different than Bayern was in the previous leg. City's defense is the best in the Premier League, probably the best in Europe this season. They just don't give up a ton of scoring chances. And it's different than City was even a year or 2 or 3 ago, where they were just more of a, we're going to outscore you. Now they will shut things down defensively. They have all season. So it's absolutely possible that PSG gets through. This is, I've seen some projections, like 538's SPI projections have City at like 95% to advance, which is a little bit generous, but I also understand it given PSG's league form, like we talked about. So that's an extreme, but plus 400. I think the real answer is somewhere in the middle there. PSG's got a shot, but given City's defensive prowess, and I should add, Kylian Mbappe may not play this game. I didn't check the papers this morning, but as of last night, he missed the game over the weekend. He had a calf injury, so it looks like he won't play. Even if he does, there's that question of, for anybody coming back from injury, how good is he going to be? So I think that's a factor because that hurts. Obviously, you lose one of the best 5 players in the world. Your team's not going to be as good. So yeah, PSG's got a shot. If I'm pricing it out, I'm thinking it's 1 out of 6 or 7, something in that range that they get through. So they got a shot, but I just trust City so much more here. Yeah,
I can't make a case for him either. And, if you can't either, and you're the expert, it's kind of an uphill mountainous climb for PSG. They'd have to have a lot of breaks go their way. And it didn't seem like City is the type of team that would be error prone in a situation like this. Now with the total of this game, conceptually, I think, okay, well, they have the 2 away goals. They have the win. Do they just sit on the lead then? Everything is defense and, literally like in the NFL, don't let anything get behind you.
Yeah, they might because, you give up that 1 goal to PSG, you're down 1-0 and you're still advancing. So they might. I don't think it's in City's nature to do that, especially I would guess early on, or maybe they feel it out early and then kind of ramp up the pressure offensively. But I would guess it's going to be the opposite, where City may try and get that one goal early, and that it wouldn't necessarily kill the game because PSG's got to get 2 regardless. If City scores first, PSG gets 2, then you're going to extra time, that sort of thing. I don't think it's in City's nature, and they have so much talent offensively, they can almost accidentally start creating chances at times. So given that PSG has to press also to try and get those goals, they have to get 2 again, at least. I just don't see City just completely sitting on this. It could be very tight. It could be, City sneaks a goal late, and that's all they need. So I don't see this being high scoring. You always run the risk in these second legs, especially that, 1 goal, 2 goals, and things can just get crazy. So yeah, if somehow PSG, gets a penalty and a breakaway, and suddenly they do have 2 goals and they have that lead, then this game's going to get turned on its head because City's got to press. PSG's on the counter, which they love. So there's always a chance in soccer. 1 red card, 1 penalty, 1 funny bounce, and things just go completely upside down. So yeah, so I'd lean toward unders if I'm looking at this game. Under 2.5, you're probably looking at like plus 140, plus 150. If you want to play under 3.5, I think that's even safer. It's probably like minus 160 is my guess. So yeah, you can get the under 3 is always an option there that you saw, which was I think minus 115 or so as you flashed up. So yeah, I would lean under if I'm making a play on a total here.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, I don't know what else to think. I was looking earlier on the money line. The draw for this game is plus 310.
That's not bad. I mean, you get any draw. Broadly speaking, I like to get them over 300. Over plus 300 if I want to play them. And that's not bad because 0-0 City's fine with, 1-1 City's fine with. So if it gets to one of those scores late, and City's just going to keep the ball or try to keep the ball at least, and dribble it out just about. So that's not a terrible price. You always run the risk. You have 2 teams that can put goals up in buckets. Then the draw is a little. I don't know. It's just tougher to play it from a mental standpoint because either one of these teams, in theory, could put up 2 or 3 and makes the draw a lot less likely. But that's not a bad price for a draw that City would be very happy with in this situation.
In the unlikelihood that PSG wins 2-1 by the same score that City won, what happens then?
Yeah, so then we go to extra time, and it reminds me of something again. I always have to remind myself this for second legs. Bets by default, bets are 90 minutes plus stoppage time. So just, that 3 or 4 minutes they add on to the end. So almost every bet that you can play is for just those 90 minutes. You can find some that will say, includes extra time or 2 advance or something like that. But so I just say this as know what you're betting, because I've made this mistake before where I think I've bet one thing and I'm all excited and then realize I actually lost the bet, or I'm bummed because I think I lost the bet and I'm like, oh no, I had that for 90 minutes, not full time or whatever it is. So I said just to know what you're betting, because that can come up in these second legs. So yeah, so if PSG wins 2-1 and only 2-1, then we go to 30 minutes of extra time. And this is where I think the rule's not good. The away goals are still counting basically double for PSG. So if it's 2-1 after regular time, they go to extra time and each team scores a goal, PSG goes through because they have the away goal.
Oh, wow.
Which, I kind of get using away goals as a tiebreaker during regulation, but PSG would get another 30 minutes that Man City would not have to try to score an away goal, which I think is unfair, and I think they should change. And they've done that in some competitions, but not this one yet. But that's it. If it's 2-1, it goes to extra time. If it's still level after extra time, they go to penalties to decide who advances. So somebody's advancing tomorrow and Wednesday in these games, one way or the other.
That's pretty wild. I was just thinking, can you imagine that in the NFL where you go into overtime and the home team scores first in the overtime, and then the away team scores and the away team runs off the field with a victory? Right.
Yeah. The Ravens win 24-24.
Yeah, that would be, I think, unacceptable in many of the cities that I'm thinking of right now, for sure.
Oh, yeah, things would be on fire probably.
And for what it's worth, DraftKings actually has the total at 3.5. The over is plus 140, under is minus 175.
Yeah, I'd play that under about that price. I mean,
I
just have a hard time seeing this get to 4 goals. I mean, it's of course it's possible. At that price, it's going to happen a third of the time or so. But yeah, 2/3 of the time, I think you're definitely having 3 or fewer goals. So that would be the way I'd go on that one.
Yep. All right, so let's move on to the second leg of this event, which is Real Madrid going up against. I'm trying to find the notes
Chelsea.
here. Yeah, Chelsea. It's right in front of me. So with this matchup, this is like a totally different. To a novice who's learning from you, and that's kind of the neat thing about this show for beginning bettors in soccer, is that it seems like the winner between PSG and City, which is going to be City, pretty much has the leg up to win the whole thing.
Yeah, City 100% the favorite overall. Yeah, I thought through the PSG, sort of PSG Chelsea or PSG Madrid matchup is going to be pretty even, I think. I'm guessing from a betting standpoint. The City is, the clear-cut favorite. Even before the semis started, they were head and shoulders the best team in Europe among those four remaining.
Well, I do believe that they are the highest net worth franchise in the world, even higher than the Yankees and anybody else here in North America. So it would stand to reason that they are able to put together teams because of the financial clout they have.
Right. They're funded by basically Qatari oil sheiks and such. And the City's an interesting story because until 10 years ago, 12 years ago, they were they were not in the top 6, the top 4 of the Premier League. They'd won a couple league titles back in the 60s, I think. But they'd been relegated. They're in the second division. I may get this wrong, but I want to say like 25 years ago or so, or 20 years ago, not too long ago that they yo-yoed back and forth a little bit between the first and second division. And then, they got an infusion of oil money and they turned themselves into a super club and they've won a bunch of titles, but they haven't even gotten to a Champions League final yet. So that's why this is such a big deal. This is not an underdog story of them, spending all this money and getting there, but it is something they've never done. It's something that's very important to ownership, to Pep Guardiola, the City manager, who has won Champions League with other teams, but not with City. So getting to the final is a big deal for City on several levels, even though they're the big favorite.
Yeah, that's quite interesting too. And I guess the same thing applies with Chelsea here, because they really have not defeated Real Madrid in an official fixture, and then it'll be history if they would win on Wednesday.
Yeah, and it'd be big. So they switched managers mid-season. They had a guy named Frank Lampard was their manager, who was one of the best Chelsea players they've ever had. And they brought in a guy named Thomas Tuchel, who had coached at Dortmund. He'd coached at PSG, one of the better managers in the world. And he transformed this team into a kind of a defense-first mindset, kind of the way City has transformed this year too. This is why the stat I keep repeating everywhere possible. They've had 20. I'm gonna get this right here. 22 games under Thomas Tuchel since he took over in January. 23 games now. 23 of those have had 2 or fewer goals. He just locks it down. They still have lots of offensive firepower. If they wanted to, and there was one game where they kind of lit it up and hung 5 goals on a terrible Crystal Palace squad. They have the firepower, but that they are, again, sort of like City. They're choosing defense first, choosing to keep the ball away from your opponents. That's your defensive strategy in some ways. So it'd be a pretty big deal if he could come in mid-season, turn this team around, and get them to a Champions League final where they haven't been in, I think, 9 years, and have likely playing City, but a 1-0 game. They knocked City out in the FA Cup semifinals a couple weeks ago, so they'll think they can go toe to toe with City and knock them out again. So again, if they get there, of course.
Yeah. And that's why they play the games, clearly.
Yeah.
So with the first leg of this going 1-1, the road team now is going to have the road team in the first leg has the advantage because they get more points for the away goal.
Yeah. Chelsea's about a roughly 2-1 favorite, expected to advance. I think they're minus 175 or so to advance right now. So because they've got the away goal, it was basically a coin flip going into the first leg, and they got that away goal, which is big, just because they're going to go through with any win here, a scoreless draw. They'll go through as well. Yeah,
that's awesome. Now I'm looking at the injury list here too. Do injuries factor into this game? Because there's some names here that they look like they're guys that are playing pretty high minutes, but
it's not terribly. I mean, Real Madrid's not going to have Sergio Ramos be honest, I'm not sure if Rafael Varane, their other center back, is healthy. But they've got guys who have stepped in and played well enough that I don't think it's a big deal. Ramos and Varane are good players, have been world-class players at times. Ramos is, on the back end of his career, was still good. So yeah, off the top of my head, I don't think there's any significant injuries to keep an eye on for either team in this leg. Nothing unknown, at least, that's different as far as changes since the first leg went.
So I guess if I'm reading between the lines, not trying to speak on your behalf, but my guess is that you're going to say something like a 2-1 Chelsea win over Real.
I mean, if 2-1 would surprise me, to be honest, just because more for the volume of goals, not the Chelsea win, but just 3 goals. As I said, 20 of 23 games under Tuchel have had under 3 goals. And this is where I always try to play out, how is this game going to go? What is going to happen? So let's just kind of tick through scenarios. Chelsea's fine with a 0-0 game. If it's 0-0, that's fine. They're not going to press. They're just going to prevent Real Madrid from doing something. If Chelsea scores first, they're going to shut it down, as much as they can, the same sort of thing. Because they'll have a cushion, because if Madrid scores, then they go into extra time, that sort of thing. But they'll have that 1-goal lead and shut it down. Let's say Real Madrid scores first. They are going to want to shut it down offensively. They've got that away goal. It's not the away goal so much as just being up 2-1 on aggregate at that point. Again, they have a cushion, but they are going to try and shut it down, maybe get a goal on the counter, that sort of thing. So I feel like whichever way this game goes, it's going to, at least one of the teams is going to be super inclined to keep this defensive and really prevent opportunities. And so for that reason, I like the under of 2.5 here. If I had to put my life on the line or something, I would think Chelsea would advance here. I'm just kind of playing the numbers and probabilities, of course, but just almost any way this goal goes, even if it's like the first game where they come out wide open, which was surprising, and they each get a goal early, like going into extra time is not the worst thing for either team. Chelsea, again, probably wants to avoid it since the Madrid away goals count double basically in extra time. But I just see like the way this plays out, the most likely things are that it's going to be a low scoring, and one or both teams are going to be okay with keeping it low scoring. Keep it 0-0 toward the end, and then both teams try to steal a goal. That's not an unlikely scenario either.
2 questions for you.
Yep.
Over here in North America, on this side of the pond, there's sometimes people say, the referee's going to swallow his whistle in the last 2 minutes of an NBA game, or the last 5 minutes, or in the NFL during the playoffs, they let the boys play a little bit rougher and don't call as many pass interference calls. Does that occur in a situation like this, where the referees will do everything they can to avoid those dreaded yellow and red cards?
A little bit. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, penalties are actually up in the Champions League and Europa League. Wow. The European competitions tend to be higher than the domestic leagues, which, that I don't know if it's unusual, but it's just kind of the nature. Like Premier League tends to be more physical, and so there are things you might get away with in the Premier League you won't in Champions League. I don't know that it's an unusual amount of caution that you'll see on behalf of the referees. Then I think there's probably a little bit of reluctance. You're going to make sure that red card is, you got to earn the red card, so to speak. So you'll see some of that. But I don't know that it's out of line than something you're normally going to see, early in the competition, or even kind of in your, big games on a league schedule, something like that. So there's something to it. But like I said, penalties are actually up. Part of that has to do with how the video review works, which is kind of a little bit different in every competition. So penalties are up. That doesn't necessarily mean that yellow cards and red cards are up, because obviously you can have a foul without in the box and concede a penalty without picking up a card. So I guess that's kind of a long way of saying not too much, but keep an eye on the penalties, because they have popped a little bit more in this competition than some of the domestic leagues this season.
That's very interesting. So it's a function more of the players playing more aggressively because of the situation.
I think so. Yeah, there's some desperation to it.
Up.
Yeah. You're so desperate to prevent a goal, and you got guys at the highest level, and they've got the confidence. They think they can do this, knock the ball away without taking the player out or whatever. So yes, there's a little bit of that there.
Now, in the game itself, what would be a scenario to look for during the game where you would see one of the teams start to press, or go into that shutdown mode? What markers are out there to look at that would say, okay, this team's now shutting it down. You can tell by the way they're structured on the field, aligned.
I mean, generally, you're look at how many players are crossing midfield. I mean, that's kind of a super simple thing, but as we'll say, Chelsea is moving the ball forward. That they work in the opposition half. How many guys, especially if there's some sort of kind of a breakaway opportunity, like how many numbers are they committing forward? Maybe if you've got a lead, if they're sitting on a lead and are super cautious not to concede, it might only be 2 or 3. Or if they've got to get a goal, it might be 5 or 6. It could be somewhere in between. This is obviously generalizing because there's a million different scenarios and positioning and all that stuff comes into play. But yeah, how many guys are crossing midfield in various circumstances? If you have a corner kick, how many guys you get in the box? If you're sitting a lot of guys back to protect against a quick counterattack, that's something there. So that's kind of the general rule of thumb, is how many guys they're putting forward, how is this changing, and just kind of how there's a freneticism to a pace. When you really have to get a goal, you're not just kind of sitting around feeling things out. You're trying to go forward, you're trying to go vertical more than horizontal. So it's just kind of it's a pacing thing, it's a positioning thing, and also you could look at the opposite of the moving guys across midfield is kind of the defense standpoint. Like, what's your structure like? Generally, if you have 4 backs, if it's later in a game and you're not interested in moving forward, it might almost turn into a 5-back set, or you just drop guys into different spots, so your fullbacks on the outside aren't moving forward as much. So yeah, it's just kind of where's everybody on the field, and what are you leaving behind the ball in order to keep the other team from getting a quick strike opportunity?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Now, will a team that's in shutdown mode ever take a shot at just like getting a breakaway goal because they know the opponent's pressing?
Oh yeah.
And it has to leave holes in the defense, I would think.
Absolutely. The other team's only leaving a couple of guys back, so to speak. I mean, you'll even see subs occasionally made for this. Put in your speedy guy up top because you're going to loop the ball in behind to try and hit him on the breakaway. There's a famous one for Chelsea with Fernando Torres. They made a Champions League run back in 2012, kind of in that vein. So yeah, you'll see it happen. It's again, it may not be with 5 guys rushing, but it may be 1 or 2, and that may be all they need, given that the defense is pressed forward to try and join the attack and make something happen. So yeah, you'll see some of that.
Yeah, these games are gonna be great. And what I like most about it is that it's at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
I feel like I'm living on the West Coast now.
Right. No, I mean, it's a real thing. I mean, this is how I learned to follow soccer. I'm in college. What are you doing at 3:00 in the afternoon? Well, we're not studying. We're gonna, flip on the soccer games, and this is how I got into Champions League and such in the first place, 20 some odd years ago. So yeah, the timing is really nice for anybody who, obviously isn't occupied during these hours, and it's just kind of, you can flip on. Even if you're just a casual fan, like, it's a good casual watch. Soccer is an easy casual watch game because you can kind of half watch. You hear the rise of either the announcer or the fans, if there are fans, that sort of thing, and you don't feel like you're missing anything. Kind of half paying attention. There's obviously more you can take away if you pay more attention and that sort of thing, just like anything else. But it is a good kind of half watch in the afternoon sort of sport.
Yeah, I can't imagine the pressure it's on some of these players, the stars, and especially the goalie.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not the goalie's fault and there was a breakdown in the defense, they're the target, and that's pretty hard to handle. I think the pressure on them is probably greater than say a quarterback in our Super Bowl.
Yeah. Because plus if a keeper makes the save, like, the credit is out of proportion. You make a good save, the credit you get is going to be less than the blame you will get if you don't make the save. And that's where the quarterback analogy is apt. And this is where it splits a little bit, is that a quarterback does something well, he's going to get a ton of praise. You're going to be the MVP of the Super Bowl in all likelihood. Whereas a keeper makes a couple saves, unless you're just making, save upon save upon save, or a high volume of saves, you're not going to be praised in quite that same way. The pressure is great, and that's what, the desperation that you can find toward the end of games is what makes, it's Champions League semifinals is what makes it great.
Yeah, the emotions, right? That is what makes it great. It's like, again, I didn't mean to draw analogies to other sports, but I watch the Kentucky Derby every year, and it's just, it's the Super Bowl of that sport, and you just can't help to get caught up in those 2 minutes, with those horses running the way they do, and the same thing in all these championship games. So needless to say, it's going to be exciting. And I like what you said about the game sound, because soccer has a sound that it's like it's more than a buzz. And and it's not it's appealing. It's appealing to me. It's I've never really realized that till I started really watching these games closely. But it has a hum to it. And then
because the game is continuous, I feel like it's almost there's just a wave of the sound comes up and down, whereas it's different. It kind of reminds me a little bit. Playoff baseball is kind of this way, where every pitch matters so much. It's almost a little more of a continuous thing than it is during the regular season, where people aren't as plugged in. You don't have as many fans, whatever. So there's a little bit of that because playoff baseball, every pitch kind of like or whatever it is.
It's true.
So there's an element of that in soccer that it is fun. You could almost tell what's happening just by watching a wave of the sound. A wave of the fans' audio during the game, and it's part of the emotion. It's unrelenting. You're going for 45 minutes. You get a little break, and then it's going again, and you don't get those breaks of TV timeouts. There's obviously some stoppages for injuries or out of bounds or corners or whatever, but it's different than any other sport. It's kind of a relentless pressure. You see that in hockey. It's like playoff hockey, especially where you're just like the tension just builds and is almost unbearable, even as a fan and as players. I don't know how they deal with it, but it's what they do.
Yeah, I guess that's the better analogy, soccer to hockey, because if it's a one goal event and it's game 7, then the other team can obviously pull the goalie in favor of another offensive player to try to tie the game, and that's when it gets nuts.
Yep. Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah, it is. So after this, and the two teams that get through, I have to be careful not to say win, because that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
They will meet for the championship game, and that takes place more than a week from now, right?
Yeah, this is May. It's the end of May. I got the date right here. It is May 29th. So they get a month off almost from Champions League. They're still playing their league games. Some of the teams have cup finals and such. But it'll be a one-off final in Turkey, I believe, in May 29th. So they'll have plenty of time. It's the finale of the European season before they shift into summer gear for Euros and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have to admit, it's hard to keep track of all these soccer teams and soccer leagues, and but if I find myself, if you organize it by league, then you can start learning what are the big events, what are the championships, and it's all pretty cool. I'm still trying to get up to speed, knowing that this is the best of the best.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge.
It's pretty easy to figure out. But then there's literally dozens of other leagues around the world that are doing well, as franchises. It's really cool.
I liken it. My analogy I always use is college basketball. If they ran the regular season and the NCAA tournament and the conference tournament, if they ran them concurrently instead of consecutively, that's sort of what it's like, because every country has its own league, just like all these different conferences in college basketball. And they're just playing them all. The simultaneous part is what is baffling to Americans, and it was baffling to me initially. I was like, "Wait, they just played this team, but now it's a different competition, and there's different rules, and you have different players eligible, and all this stuff." And it is weird. It takes a little time to figure out. Playing FIFA helps a lot. That's how I learned a lot. Is like you play FIFA and you just kind of get the hang of it, because you're playing through a schedule with one team, and you realize players are just things are different and how all that works. So that's an underrated way I think soccer kind of crept into the U.S. mindset, especially for younger people. So it takes some time, and it's strange, and things still pop up, and it is a lot to keep track of. It's hard. There's so much going on, and you have so many leagues and competitions that it gets weird. But it's fun and rewarding, especially when you get deep in these Champions League type of things.
Well, at the same time, you are part of True Media Sports, which is focused on data analytics, and I'm sure you probably have a ton, mountains and mountains of data and databases on the soccer league. So that's one of many things that True Media offers companies, franchises, individuals.
It's fun to see how teams are using the data, because we basically pull all the data into one platform and let coaches, analysts, whoever it is, use that data to find what they're looking for. So we get questions, people asking how to do stuff, and like, oh yeah, well, you can do that this way on the site, or oh, we hadn't thought of that, that's a use case, we need to figure out how to make that doable on the site. So it's fun to see the teams using the numbers, because I think we may have talked about this last week. Like the reason, it's part of the reason these numbers, just things as simple as expected goals or whatever metrics you want to use, part of the reason that they matter, so to speak, is that teams are using these, just like in other sports, to make decisions. So, you hear about people who hate war in baseball or whatever, and that's fine. Just know that teams are using some version of war, probably their own version. They're using these things to make decisions. That's part of the reason that media want to use that, because it's reflecting decision making, it's reflecting progression in the game. In a lot of cases, most cases, they're also better metrics for a variety of reasons. So yeah, it's a transition, but it's fun working with all these teams, working with media outlets to see how they can use the data to either tell stories in the media case or player recruitment or whatever it might be on the team side.
Yeah, and before I let you go here, we talked about the NFL draft, and I think we mentioned the idea, or at least the concept, of creating an app that would help general managers pick the right player that would fit into what they have existing as a core. And maybe it's not the best player on the board, but it's the player that's going to make them the best going forward.
That's always the challenge, right? I mean, look at the Raiders, who reached for the offensive lineman in the first round, whose name I can't remember, and that's the balance. Was he worth the whatever it was 17th pick in the draft to them? Yes. Could they have also gotten him 40 picks later? Probably. So is there? I don't know what the right answer is, but it certainly seems like in a case like that, they didn't get the best value, even if they did maybe get the best player.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of these. I almost sometimes wish the mock drafts wouldn't be there to read, although it's very interesting. They're all well done.
Yeah.
And they usually tie into what's going to happen. But I guess, one of these years, I wish I could just go to the draft and have no clue that other than Trevor Lawrence being the number one pick.
Right. Like if we'd gone into this last draft cold and Trey Lance is the number 3 pick, we'd all be like, what?
Yeah.
Like, who is he? Almost. Even if you told a lot of people like me, a casual fan, 2-3 weeks ago that he was the number 1 pick or number 3 pick, and they're like, But then there's just so much coverage, and by the time you get to the draft, it's almost expected. So yes, there's something charming about the old way it used to be. Like I remember Steve McNair, when he went, I think he went in the first round, and it was expected, but who had ever seen Alcorn State play? Like I think he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, which was a big deal. But yeah, there was like an air of mystery almost, because like, all right, how's this going to work out? And then he doesn't play most of the first year, and then he obviously turns into a very good quarterback. So yes, there is something charming about kind of the old school way of doing it, but yeah, we're not going back now. Yeah,
that first round seemed to go pretty well for just about everybody. I think my takeaway from it was that New England came away with the real coup. First of all, not having to trade up to get their guy, and then literally falling right into their laps, and that connects him with the Saban Belichick connection. They're basically running the same offenses. It's short passes, yards after the catch, yards separation from the defender. And, from what one of the guys that I had on one of my shows, Rob Vino, mentioned that he was at the Senior Bowl game. And, the Alabama quarterback, usually they only give 25% of the playbook to the quarterback representing the one side. But within 5 days, he had the whole playbook and was able to go to the line of scrimmage and make audibles. And it was truly mind-blowing.
Interesting. Yeah. And that bodes well.
Personally going forward, and this is off topic with soccer, I think New England is actually probably flying under the radar, which is incredibly hard to believe given the last 20 some years here. But I don't think Belichick would be still doing this if they were going to be 3-13.
Right. So, yeah, you think he'd just bail. That whole division is interesting. I mean, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I'm a little biased, but I mean, just start at the very top and look at the quarterbacks. You got Josh Allen in Buffalo, who's one of the top 10 quarterback in the game. You've got Tua in Miami. Interesting. Don't know how good he's going to be, but there's ceiling. There's a high ceiling, obviously. You've got the Jets just took Zach Wilson, and the Patriots just took Mac Jones. So you've got 4 quarterbacks all out in the last 5 years. Very interesting. Whatever's going to happen, it's it's open. It's going to be fun. As a Dolphins fan, I'm optimistic. They got Tua a lot of weapons, so I'm excited about that to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think the Dolphins would be the one team that can probably go after Buffalo. I would put Buffalo still as the first.
Yeah, they got to be.
But the level, the playing field level of those four teams now has gotten a lot more even than any time probably in the last 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
The Jets did the right thing in the second pick of the first round, taking the offensive lineman, because you can have the greatest quarterback in college history stand on the field, but if he doesn't have any protection, I could be out there, and the result would be the same.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think the Jets are finally heading in the right direction. I'm a guy that's half full all the time with the glass. The glass is never half empty, and I would always get upset a little bit that people would just continuously bash the Jets. And when the Jets beat Seattle this past year, I was like, yeah, that's good. Way to go for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
something to be positive about. So, and I'll tell you, Zach Wilson, and he looks like the real deal. I think that was a great pick. And lastly, your thoughts on the third pick with Lance. I'll admit, I immediately compared him to Carson Wentz because of the connection, right?
Yeah, the obvious connection.
And I watched the highlights that they showed, and I was actually with a Wager Talk Sports Memo show for the NFL Draft, so I couldn't help myself to think of the comparison. Like, the video of Lance was, in my opinion, vastly better in terms of athletic skill and elusiveness than Carson Wentz could ever dream of being. So I went right back to what we talked about the last time we were together with the app that would help general managers realize, what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah, and I like the fit of Lance into a Kyle Shanahan offense, because who's better at developing a running game and using that mobility than Shanahan? There aren't a whole lot. Like, you can see him fitting in very well with RPOs and whatever they might employ from an offensive standpoint. I mean, look, I don't pretend to be a scout. It's hard for me just to kind of wrap my head around, like, look, you're going to take this guy who played, 16 or 17 games at the FCS level, and that's his career. And that's tough for me to wrap my head around, but I don't know. Again, I'm not a talent evaluator, and so that's not my area. Just from a kind of a general perception standpoint, it's kind of the same thing. We're saying this when Trubisky was drafted, and I know it sounds like second guessing, and it kind of is, but like, you're going to take this guy who was, decent for North Carolina over someone Deshaun Watson, who was great for Clemson. I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything, but it just feels wrong, if nothing else.
I think the one certain fact is that wide receivers now become pretty much a dime a dozen.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to figure out. Like, again, Dolphins fan, have to get two weapons in this draft. Just stay at 6 and take Jalen Waddle. You could trade down and try to get Devontae Smith later, if that was an option. Like, I was kind of happy when they were at 12, because I was thinking they might get one of those receivers at 12. In retrospect, they probably wouldn't have, so I'm glad they moved up. But yeah, you take a guy there, or you try to find one of these guys late in the first round, because there's always receivers that pop later. Or do you feel like you have to get? I don't know. It's a tough thing to figure out. Justin Jefferson's great. They had to take him early, things like that. So I'm hoping Waddle obviously is the answer for the Dolphins, but there's so many receivers that come out of, the Steelers find some guy in the 4th round every year, it seems like. So yeah, there's lots of talent to pick from, and it's always interesting to see where it comes from in the draft.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert that would apply for a general manager's position, but there are times where I think I should be, and then I wake up and I realize I'm not. But I think wide receiver, Waddle was a great pick. And the one thing I'm starting to really realize with the difficulty of picking a wide receiver in the first round is that those kids dominated in college football level. Then they get put into the pros, and there's an immediate, large increase in the competition on the other side of the ball. So for the first time in that kid's life, he might be lined up against a defensive back that's faster than he is.
Yep.
And then how they respond to that emotionally goes a long way to determine whether that was a really smart pick. But
that's I mean, as a Dolphins fan, that's the question about Tua, and Mac Jones, same thing. Were these Alabama quarterbacks good because they are good? Are they good because they had the best offensive line, the best receivers, and the best running back in college football? I don't know. They're both obviously a factor, and that's the really hard thing to tease out, whether it's trying to do it with numbers or trying to do it with the eye test.
In the same thing with Trevor Lawrence, I just can't imagine. He seems like a young man that can handle the immense pressure now that's going to be on him in Jacksonville, and just hope that it goes well, because that's a franchise I've always had because they're always the team that's getting beat up, except for that one year in the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, who I kind of lean towards. They should have won that game.
Had a lead late. Yep. They had a shot.
They should have won that game.
Yep.
But anyway, let's recap your soccer picks quick, and then I'll let you get on your way, and then we'll have you back probably once or twice between now and May 29th. Fits in your schedule, that would be great, because then we can really ramp up all the detail for the championship game. But for the semifinals here, I know we're under.
Yeah, we're under Chelsea, Real Madrid, under 2.5, price around minus 150 or so. Always shop around, of course. But I just have a hard time seeing the way that match plays out. Game going, getting to 3 goals, 1 out of 3 times or so. Yep. And let's see, Man City. I like Man City to win against PSG. I just think they're the far better team. This is, it's the who do you trust sort of thing. I know that City doesn't need a win to advance, but I just think it's in their nature, and they have the talent and ability to do that. And if they get a lead, they're just going to sit on it, and this game's over, and the series is over. So yeah, PSG might snag one and pull a tie or something, but I take City to win the game outright around minus 150.
Sounds awesome. And I'm going to tell you, and no pressure. But that'll do it for this edition of the Predictive Playbook for the soccer UEFA semifinals, taking place tomorrow at 3, and then again on Wednesday at 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, Paul, thank you very much for being on the show. For him, myself, and the Predictive Playbook, may all the wins be yours.